mute, Vicky.
No, I can hear you.
Now I can hear you, Kelly.
Vicki, can you hear us talking now? We weren't talking previously.
I can just now hear somebody, but that's, I could see Kelly's mouth moving, but I couldn't hear anything.
I can hear you fine, Kelly.
Yeah, I kept turning my mute on and off because I'm trying to. Okay, we are live.
Okay, you want me to get it going then, Kelly?
Yeah, it's 3 o'clock. I think we're ready to go.
Okay, well, I'd like to welcome the commissioners, the staff, and the public to the meeting. Thank you for your patience as we learn a new way of hosting public meetings in response to the governor's orders related to COVID-19. Oregon Revised Statutes 192.640 and 192.670 allow for public bodies to hold meetings via means of phone or electronic communication. To ensure for public safety but increase participation, Wasco County has elected to hold all public meetings for the near term via video conferencing. Staff has prepared a public participation guide that was emailed to all registered participants on how to use the Zoom software. It is also available for download or view on the Wasco County Planning Commission page. We are also live streaming this via YouTube and on the Wasco County website. At this point, I'd like Director Brewer to do a roll call, please.
All right, I'm going to call your names, and then if the commissioners could please take themselves off mute and indicate their presence for the record, that would be very much appreciated. Start with Commissioner Vicki Ashley.
Here.
Commissioner Russell Hargreaves.
Here.
Commissioner Bradley DeHart is excused this afternoon. Commissioner Lynn McIntyre.
Here.
Commissioner Mike Davis.
Present.
Commissioner Kate Willis. Thought I saw her name in there. Oh,
Kate just
Commissioner Kate
entered.
Willis, are you there? I'll circle back. Commissioner Cristiano.
I'm here.
Commissioner Leroy Booth.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Marcus Swift. I haven't seen his name pop up yet. And Kate Willis, have you joined us?
Yes, present.
Thank you. And staff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Kelly Housley Glover, Long Range Planner and Project Manager for Wasco County 2040.
Thank you. Jency?
I'm Jency Smith, Planning Coordinator.
And I'm Angie Brewer, Wasco County Planning Director. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to some important announcements. This meeting is being recorded and will be publicly available. All participants must mute themselves unless they are speaking. Lines providing feedback while not speaking will be muted to ensure others can hear. Only you can unmute yourself using the mic icon. If you are participating by phone, unmute yourself by dialing *6. Participants behaving inappropriately will be promptly removed from the meeting. The chair will specifically invite participants for public comment at the appropriate times. So please be patient and wait to be called on. Please refrain from using the comment feature unless directed by the chair. It will distract from the intended flow of the public hearings. At this time, I'd like to invite the public to unmute their mics and share any comment they may have for items that is not listed on the agenda.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Can you please state your name and address and then feel free?
Joseph M. Pearson, Pearson. And my residence is in Florence, Oregon. However, I own land in Wasco County. I've been paying taxes on it for about 10 years. And I got this notice, and I am curious what kinds of negative impact these two ordinances have. And it was I don't know what these ordinances are. I couldn't find that in the reading, what you plan to do. So that's my purpose in being on this call.
Okay, Kelly, do you want to address that, or Angie? How do you want to go forward with that?
I'll be giving a staff presentation ahead of comment, and hopefully that will answer some of your questions.
Wonderful.
We also are requesting the Planning Commission issue a continuance until September 15th as a result of the wildfires and the impact from folks getting evacuated. So we have a few weeks left before the Planning Commission deliberates and makes a recommendation to the board. And in that time, I'm happy to have a phone call with you or exchange emails and give you some more information about the proposed changes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments they might have that are for items that are not on the agenda today?
Yes, my name is John Pearson. I live in Wasco County. I live in Mosier. And like my brother Michael, who has land next door, very concerned about ordinances that don't really say anything as to what, I mean, I'd have to be a land use attorney or a planner to be able to try to figure out, go through this maze of things to try to figure out really what impact it's going to have on our properties. We have an older brother, 89 years old, that plans on building a small home for himself here. And I guess we're just very concerned. History has taught us on this property we're on a historic 1800s cattle ranch that got painted over with a forestry brush. And we've had our property rights taken away systematically for the last 30, 40 years. So we're very concerned what little property rights we have left, that there could be elements trying to even take them further away. So we really do need to know what the impact is. I mean, to me, a lot of the people that own a lot of land in this county are elderly people. They don't do Zoom. They don't rarely do. Some of them don't do computer. I would have missed your hearing had I not received a postcard from Oregon Property Rights, and I thank them for doing that, because I wouldn't even have known of your meeting. So we've lost a lot of our property rights on our property. It's a large property, and it's a mixed-use property. But we're concerned. When I read your ordinances, it doesn't tell me anything as to what these limitations are going to be put on our properties, or what rights. And I mean, with a stroke of a pen, you could reduce our property, the value of our property, 50%. We don't know. We don't know what you're doing to us. We don't think you're doing anything for us. I'm concerned that I'm concerned about what the unintended consequences are of your ordinances, and I don't know how to get around that, because I know your people have they're good people. They put a lot of work into this, but I don't really know what the end game is. The last meeting I went to, it looked like to me that Fish and Wildlife was driving the bus, that everything was being done for the benefit of Fish and Wildlife so they could sell more licenses and tags to kill animals. And that's what they do for a living. And so I'm just concerned about how we preserve our property rights, what's left of them.
Okay, maybe we can get Director Brewer, you look like you wanted to comment.
I just wanted to thank both gentlemen for their comments and to make sure it's very clear that those comments seemed related to the content we're going to be discussing this evening. And if they would like those comments to be on the record for the decision and the deliberation of the Planning Commission, they'll need to reiterate those comments after the public hearing is opened. So I just wanted to make sure that you were both aware that if you'd like those comments on the record for the Planning Commission's deliberation, and anything that carries forward to the Board of County Commissioners, that I would recommend you reiterate those comments when we open up for public comment on the topics this evening. But thank you very much for sharing those perspectives and that feedback.
And we will give you, once we open the hearing, we will give you time. We'll give you, everybody has like 3 minutes apiece to make public comment for it. So you'll have your opportunity to read into the record too. And then we're also going to be doing Dr. Glover will be putting forth a presentation to help people kind of understand what's going on today, so that hopefully it'll be clear when we're all done here. So currently the comments are for things that are not on the agenda tonight. So if there's anybody else that has anything that's not on the agenda, we can say it now. And if you would like to wait for the comment portion for the purpose of the hearing today, that's when we'll give you guys your time to talk, so it's on the record and it'll go to the commissioners. Does anybody else have anything for stuff that's not listed on the agenda? Okay, at this time I'm going to open the hearing. The public hearing is now open for the purpose of the Planning Commission's consideration of land use application file 921-18. -000221, the periodic review work task 18, 921-19-000126, a post acknowledgement plan amendment to revise goals 4 and 8, and 921-20-000072, a post acknowledgement plan amendment to revise the plan revisions process and goal exception chapters and adopt a new introduction to Wasco County 2040, the Wasco County Comprehensive Plan. Because of its impacts to many of the residents as a result of the recent Moser Creek fire, staff has requested we continue the hearing until September 15th for deliberation. So I'd like to request a motion to continue the hearing until September 15th for deliberation.
I'll second it.
I need a first.
I move.
So I'll make a motion that we continue the deliberation until the subsequent hearing.
September 15th.
Thanks, Chris.
Commissioner
And then I'll
Hargraves
second it.
has moved to continue the hearing for deliberation until September 15th. Do I have a second?
I have second.
Commissioner Davis, second.
I second that motion.
Okay, open it for discussion? Anybody have any discussion on it? Okay, let's call for a vote to continue tonight's hearing until September 15th for deliberation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
I have a question on that, Chris.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are all the
I know who this is.
planners in? Or do we need to designate an alternate?
Is this Leroy?
Yes.
And Director Brewer does, I'm not sure who the alternates are right now.
I'm the first alternate, so I don't know if everyone's in or I need to vote or not.
I believe everybody's here tonight, aren't they?
We're missing Commissioner DeHart and Commissioner Swift, who's an alternate as well. We have a quorum, so we don't necessarily need to rotate in an alternate for voting, but you certainly could, Chair, if you'd like to.
Commissioner Swift is here also. I see
Oh,
him.
thank you.
I guess if we have a quorum, we don't really need to worry about it at this point. We can acknowledge Commissioner Booth as being a voting member tonight, and we'll allow him to vote too. Does that sound right? Okay, so let's do the vote again. All in favor of continuing the hearing for deliberation until September 15th?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, it passes. So tonight will be reserved for a brief staff presentation followed by public comment. Planning Commissioner deliberation and recommendations will be made on Tuesday, September 15th from 3 to 5. A registration link for that hearing is available on the project website, wasco2040.com. Okay, tonight the procedure I'd like to follow is I would like the planning department staff to present their report. We'll provide an opportunity for the public to testify. The hearing is scheduled for 2 hours. We will try to conclude the hearing by 5 p.m. Testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. Staff will time each comment period and will mute when the 3 minutes have expired. The rules of evidence are as follows. No person shall present irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious testimony or evidence. If you have submitted written comments, please do not reiterate it in oral testimony unless you have further information to add. Evidence received shall be of a quality that reasonable persons rely upon in the conduct of their daily affairs. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the criteria applicable to the subject hearing, and failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes further appeal based on that issue. At this point, we should talk about disclosure of interest of ex parte contact. Do any of the commission members wish to disqualify themselves for any personal or financial interest in this matter? Okay, does any commission member wish to report any significant ex parte or pre-hearing contacts? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the right of any commission member to hear this matter? Is there any member of the audience who wishes to question the jurisdiction of this body to act on behalf of Wasco County in this matter? Okay, at this point, I would like to make sure that all participants mute themselves and hold questions until the end of the staff's presentation. The meeting host will mute if needed. So if Dr. Kelly wants to begin her presentation, she can fire it off.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two presentations and they're correlated to the ordinance numbers that were listed in the notice. I want to start with the easiest one that we've received no comments on to date in written testimony. And it appears we have one person who's registered to speak on it tonight, but I thought it would be easiest to get this one out of the way. So this is related to ordinance 20-004. Let's see. Okay. So
Kelly, I'm sorry, you're presenting the wrong screen. We can see the registration report and not your presentation.
Oh, okay. Here. Does that work?
Yep, thank you.
Great. Okay, thanks. This suite of revisions is for 3 chapters. The plan revision process chapter, the goal exceptions chapter, and the introduction chapter. I'm going to start with chapter 15 because we really aren't making any substantive updates to this. It's mostly moving it into a new format. We are switching it from chapter 11 to Chapter 15. We've moved some of the definitions to the sidebar rather than in the bulk of the text, and we renumbered the criteria in addition to adding a finding for more clarity for this chapter, but those are the only changes that we are proposing to make. I want to clarify that this chapter is used predominantly for any updates to the comprehensive plan. So for instance, all the changes that we've made to date over Wasco County 2040, they've been accompanied by a staff report, and the bulk of the criteria in the staff report is what you will find in this chapter. So those are the things that staff would have to make findings on and present evidence in support. The Chapter 16 was previously a different chapter. It's a new chapter, new numbered chapter, but old material that has been significantly revised to meet the requirements of state law. It's the goal exception committed lands chapter, and I thought it would be useful for members of the public to clarify what a goal exception means. In rural jurisdictions in Oregon, the bulk of our lands are in what's called a resource zone. So they're designated farm or forest. Some counties also have mineral, like aggregate mineral zones as well. But they match up with statewide land use planning goals. And so when there's a proposal to rezone one of these resource zones into a non-resource use, like a residential or commercial or industrial, the applicant actually has to make the case that they qualify for what's called a goal exception. So we see this in this chapter. All the goal exceptions are focused on either exceptions to goal 3, which is agricultural lands, or exceptions to goal 4, which is forest lands. As I mentioned, it was previously chapter 13. We're moving it to 16. We have revised it into the new format. This chapter was by and large developed in the 80s. And so that was ahead of when the National Scenic Area Act was adopted. And so it meshed together committed lands in the scenic area and outside of the scenic area. And we thought it was really important for clarity's sake for planners of the future and also for community members to really distinguish which areas were National Scenic Area lands. I want to also say that the reason the National Scenic Area has its own comprehensive plan, which is the management plan. But I did talk at length to the Department of Land Conservation and Development about their thoughts in preserving those goal exceptions, historic goal exceptions in National Scenic Areas, in case anything were ever to change with the National Scenic Area. And they thought it was best to preserve that. The format that we've changed it to, as I mentioned before, is based on statutory requirements and a consultation with DLCD. So it's really, we're required by state statute to preserve any goal exceptions in the comprehensive plan and to do it in a very specific fashion that we weren't necessarily doing consistently. And so that's why the format is significantly revised. I also worked with the Geographics Information Systems Department to create new maps. So they're all uniform and easy to read and reflect any changes to the parcels. So it should be up-to-date information. As I mentioned, the purpose of this chapter is to serve as an inventory for any goal exceptions or committed lands. And that's required by Oregon Administrative Rules 660-004. Planners would predominantly use this in research for development applications. It may be used by community members for that purpose as well. But generally, it just serves as a historic marker of what we've rezoned in Wasco County. As I mentioned, new maps, we've got consistent colors. We did a series of changes to tax lots over the decades, and so we've made sure to capture those updated tax lots. So again, very easy for anybody researching to find this information. We've included the past and the current zoning because that's changed, the date, the method of approval, and then a brief description that really demonstrates why the exception was granted. So finally, for this suite of proposed revisions, we are introducing the introduction chapter. It was one of our main goals with Wasco County 2040 to not only significantly update the comprehensive plan, but to do it in a way that made it usable for planners and also for community members. And we felt that it was important to really give everybody a lot of information about the history of the program and then how to use the plan. And so the new introduction chapter features it's a lengthy chapter that features a lot of really useful information for planners and community members about the legal framework for a comprehensive plan, the history of our zoning, what the statewide planning goals are that make up the framework of the comprehensive plan. We also have introduced how to use the plan. So if somebody's picking it up for the first time and really doesn't have that land use planning background, they really know what they're looking at and what to look for. We also have a series of maps that we rely on in making permitting decisions or other kinds of decisions in the department. And so we've made sure to really clearly identify which maps we consider official maps for Wasco County, and also indicated when they've been revised. So it's very clear to members of the public the history of those maps, for instance, environmental protection districts like we're talking about tonight. Finally, we've included a little bit about the Wasco County 2040 process. Right when we were kicking off this process, the county also went through an extensive strategic plan and visioning and rebranding. And so we wanted to include those values in the vision for Wasco County because it's really important to our mission in the Wasco County Planning Department. Finally, any good planning document really has to have a definitions chapter so that everybody clearly understands frequently used words and what they mean in context. And so that's sort of the last portion of the introduction chapter. And that is the end of that presentation. I'm going to go ahead and boot up my other presentation here just a second. Okay. Okay, so the ordinance number listed in the notice 20-001 includes 3 updates. One is periodic review work task 18, which are revisions to goal 5 in conjunction with updates, revisions to the maps for sensitive wildlife and sensitive birds. And also we had some minor revisions to goal 4, which is forest lands, and goal 8, which is recreation chapter. So I want to touch on work task 18 first, the goal 5 issues, because I know that's the thing that a lot of citizens are most concerned about. And I've tried to really simplify my presentation to make it very clear and not jargony. But for those of you who are maybe finding out about this for the first time and have questions, we do have a lot of resources available on the website, or I'm happy to have a chat with you offline or via email to really address any of your specific concerns after the fact. When we were approved for periodic review in 2018, we saved this task for last because we knew it was one of the most critical, and we wanted to allow the greatest amount of time to really work with the state and ODF&W on making this a good quality update that was not significantly impacting residents, but really doing what we wanted to do, which was offering more transparency and clarity about our land use planning program. Specifically, we identified, ODF&W identified when we contacted them in 2017, the need to update APD 8, which is our sensitive wildlife or deer and elk habitat map, and also to update APD 12, which is our sensitive birds. This is in part because ODF&W did a significant update to their maps in 2012 that we did not consequently update our maps. And also because based on energy facilities in Wasco County, they've done some extensive studying of bird habitat, so they have better up-to-date information. And the bird habitat in particular hadn't been updated since 2005. In conjunction with that, we're also proposing some new policies and implementation strategies, really to flesh out these updates and make sure it's very clear what's being proposed, and that we'd like to see more frequent updates of these maps so that we're not sort of operating under out-of-date information. And then because the maps really go in conjunction with ordinance language, specifically with the EPD 8, Environmental Protection District 8, we're also proposing simultaneously a land use and development ordinance update to EPD 8. And we hope that we're going to make clear that really the net result should be for most people an actual reduction in restrictions. So I wanted to address why we're making these updates, because there seems to be some confusion about that. When we elected to take the route of periodic review, which is a different process for updating than most counties choose, we're required to not only go out to citizens like we did in 2017, but also contact agency partners and other people that we work with regionally, locally, federally, and statewide. And basically ask them what in our plans are problematic and what do we need to update. And it was at this point that Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, ODF&W, contacted us and informed us that our maps were out of date and needed to be brought up to date. There's actual triggers in the Oregon administrative rules and Oregon revised statutes that require us during periodic review to make these updates. And all that information is detailed in the staff report that's in conjunction with this in tonight's packet. Really, so the main goals are to make our maps consistent with ODF&W and to streamline our existing permitting process. It's important, you'll probably hear me say this more than once, but it's important to emphasize that for EPD 8, the big game habitat map, sensitive wildlife, deer and elk, we already notify ODF&W for any conditional use permit in Wasco County, regardless of whether or not they're in this overlay. So ODF&W is already getting an opportunity to comment and to work with applicants if they have a cause for concern. So the goal of this map, again, is just to make it clear to applicants where ODF&W has identified habitat exists or migration exists, and where they may need to work with applicants on some potential mitigation strategies. This slide cites the specific rules that triggered our need to make that update. The Oregon administrative rules are adopted for the Department of Land Conservation and Development to really help them implement the Oregon revised statutes. And it has some very specific rules with Goal 5, which is in the Oregon Administrative Rule 660, Division 23. And it talks about how we go about making an inventory, what the process looks like, how we define what the impacts are, and what the ordinance language is. And again, that's all detailed in the staff report. But for those of you that participated in the roadshows and some of the exercises where you were identifying impacts or potential consequences, that was part of the analysis that we actually do to determine, for example, exemptions or possible strategies for protection of the species. And that information is all available in the appendix of the proposed Chapter 5. It's called a ESEE, which is Economic, Social, Energy, and Environmental Consequences. So as I mentioned, the map that we're proposing to revise is to match the map the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife already uses to advise applications in Wasco County. And I want to explain that the reason we've got, it seems like a lot of land is coming in, but the reality is, in the past they had not identified that as needed to be listed as a migration path because so much of that land is in agricultural A1 160. So it's a minimum parcel size of 160. And that 160, those agricultural uses already do a pretty good job at protecting species. Where the concern really came in and where the conflict came in, particularly with transparency, was for things that are outside the usual agricultural practices. And those were some of the energy facilities that we've seen or proposals for rezones. And so applicants would propose to have these types of developments and then feel really surprised when Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife let them know it was actually sensitive habitats. So again, it's really important that we make it clear. This is really a clarification, and it's meant to increase transparency about what you would be getting into if you were proposing development that's outside agricultural practices or kind of the norm. So I've tried to boil down, because I know the real concern is how does this impact my property rights? I've tried to really boil down and maybe a little bit oversimplify, but really clarify what we see as the net result. It's important for me to add the caveat that one of the reasons why we always say we can't predict the actual impact or value on your property is because there's really an infinite number of scenarios and possible uses and activities that make it impossible for us to be fortune tellers, so to speak, and really see into the future. But we do have a certain level of predictability, and so that's what we've tried to boil down what we think the net result is. So for those areas that are already in EPD 8, and those are highlighted on the map on the screen, we're actually removing a few areas that were in a voluntary siting standard area. And then for the rest, they're actually going to see a net reduction in regulations. Part of this work and working with ODF&W and including so many agricultural lands was really wanting to preserve agricultural activity as the main economic development and lifestyle in Wasco County. So we are proposing to add exempt uses where we didn't have them before, and that's for things like farm uses and farm dwellings. We're also proposing to remove voluntary siting standards and fencing standards that have been identified as both by ODF&W and by the public as ineffective and unnecessary. We're also proposing to remove additional notification requirements that we have staff has determined are redundant. And those are not notification to the public, they're interagency notifications, and they're reporting that we already do and already have some other triggers for. So we're proposing to remove those. For the areas that are being proposed to be added to EPD 8, again, the main goal here is to make clear what areas in Wasco County, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife considers sensitive habitat for deer and elk. As I mentioned, conditional uses already go through a process of us notifying ODF&W and having to identify whether or not the proposed activity or use has adverse impacts to the resources. The only thing that's going to change is there will be an additional staff review component along with that. So that does add some additional staff time and consequently some additional fees. It's not astronomical fees, it's not astronomical time, but there is that component that we want to make sure the public is aware of. For type 2 uses, those are things like partitions, wineries, utilities. So again, not farm uses, but sort of the unusual activities that we see out in A1 160. They will be required to have this new staff review and ODF&W review where they may have not had to have that in the past. And again, adds additional staff time and money. So you may wonder what happens during an ODF&W review. I think there's a lot of concern that this means ODF&W has the power to prohibit any kinds of uses or activities. The actual result typically of this is ODF&W reviews the site proposal. Typically they'll go walk the property with the landowner and see the habitat, see the migration patterns, and then they may recommend some modifications to the development site. So that could be like, one of the most common things is with dwellings. They'll require the dwelling be located within 300 feet of the nearest road or access way. So if you propose to put your house way off outside of 300 feet, they may ask you to bring it in. There are some provisions in the code already for sort of variances from those standards. And that's something you would want to work with ODF&W and the planner that you're assigned to on an individual case-by-case basis. They may have some other possible mitigation measures that they recommend. It's not typical, we don't see that typically, but it is a possibility if there's some kind of unique circumstance. One thing may be, for instance, if you have a good stand of oak, you may recommend trying to preserve the oak, for instance, as long as possible. As I mentioned, staff is also required to make findings in the staff report reflecting the mitigation measures that Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has recommended, and sort of any feedback, and that may become part of a condition of approval or may have been agreed upon in the course of work with ODF&W. So for the Environmental Protection District 12, which is our sensitive birds, and that includes owl species, but mostly raptor species, we're proposing to update the map with new nesting sites and remove all the old and unviable sites that were identified as critical in 2005. ODF&W has required that we keep this map confidential, and we have notified individually any property owners impacted, whether they're going into the EPD or coming out of the EPD. I want to stress that this EPD already exempts farm and forest uses. So again, it's really targeting those kind of unusual activities and uses that happen on our landscape. I also want to share that most of these nesting sites really are occurring places where it's, as far as I understand from the experts, ODF&W, really occurring where development's not likely to happen. So it's up on ridges and places that are topographically pretty difficult to build. The ordinance language, as I mentioned early on, we're proposing to revise that in conjunction with the revised maps. And that's just to make sure that immediately those impacted will have those exemptions and not have to deal with the unnecessary criteria if they're proposing development. One thing I haven't said yet, but I think is important to stress, is these changes really affect new development. So these aren't things that we retroactively apply. It's really for any kinds of new proposals on your property. So as I mentioned, we're proposing a list of exempt uses. This slide here shows you the actual language that we're proposing. Really, we wanted to safeguard farm dwellings and the whole suite of farm support dwellings from having to be unnecessarily burdened by these restrictions. We're also proposing to exempt type 1 uses. So those are things like agricultural activity, typically would be things like accessory structures. So if you want to build a new pole barn, you wouldn't be impacted. There were some other language in here that was particularly confusing. So it outlined permitted uses and conditional uses, and that didn't make much sense to us. So couldn't figure it would make much sense to the public. So we're proposing to remove that. As I mentioned, proposing to remove fencing standards, other provisions, and all the voluntary siting standards. As I explained, conditional use permits already are required to notify ODF and W and work with them to identify whether the proposed activity or use has any adverse impacts on wildlife. And we're just making sure that that is really clear in this EPD. So we're trying to build those cross references so there's as much transparency and clarity as possible. All right, so the next proposed revision is for Goal 4, which is Chapter 4, and it's for forest lands. So one of our resource zones. This was not identified when we went out to the public in 2017 and asked for priorities. Forest lands really didn't rise to the top of major priorities that the community had, and the Department of Land Conservation and Development requested that we significantly pared down our work plan. And so we've just added these on as a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, which is a different process, but still enables us to update the language. The few things we wanted to focus on with this update, again, because we didn't do a lot of extensive work based on public feedback, was to make sure, one, the language is consistent with current status and what we're already doing in the forest lands. Remove any old antiquated language references and make sure that how the forest lands are implemented in Wasco County is very clear. We've also, the department has done a lot of work on natural hazards over the last several years, including getting a grant for community planning assistance for wildfires. And that group made some recommendations to us about possible strategies for really mitigating hazards like wildfire. And our department's also we received a grant and we'll be kicking off revisions to our community wildfire protection plan. So we wanted to make sure we referenced those two documents and aligned those policies with that work. This is really critical because one of the things, we heard two things with forest lands, probably the loudest. One was concern about water availability and quality, and two was about the wildfire risk. So wildfire, not surprisingly, is on lots of folks' mind. Unfortunately, we've had another bad fire season, particularly for forest zones. So we've really tried to make sure we're cognizant of that and addressing that in the best way we can with information outreach, and then the potential for some additional standards for safety purposes. I did want to flag a community member reached out to me, and I've attached a memo up on the packet under the More tab that explains this to the Planning Commission. But policy 4 and 5, we were not proposing to revise, but apparently when staff was changing it into the new format, there was some kind of error. So policy 4 and 5 seem to be identical. That was not the intention. The actual policy 5 really talks about dwellings being permitted in forest zones and why we have some of the implementation strategies under policy 5 that we do. So we will be updating that ahead of the September 15th meeting, but we wanted to be clear with the public that this wasn't a Scrivener's error. And because these policies weren't proposed to be revised, we're just going to revert them to what they've been historically. So finally, the last proposed chapter update for the Comprehensive Plan Wasco County 2040 is for recreation. Again, this was not a huge priority. We did get some feedback from community members, particularly concerns about shared roadways and the impacts for commercial agriculture for things like bicycle activity. And so we've tried to capture that in this chapter in a couple different ways, including this community planning issues section that we really wanted to put out there, that we are listening and we have some strategies specifically with outreach on how to try and begin to mitigate or reduce those risks that our community members are so concerned about. We also just generally heard a lot of feedback that more outreach was preferred over regulation, And we've really tried to listen to that feedback. And so this chapter, again, really stresses outreach, notifications, and coordination, and really that transparency piece. Finally, the most significant proposed change to this chapter is the adoption of a destination resort eligibility map. The reason we're proposing to do this, and I've got a map here on the screen of what's actually being proposed. The reason we're proposing to do this is twofold. One, because we heard, particularly from residents in South County, that they wanted more opportunities for economic development and ways to use their land. And so we really felt compelled to work on as many possible strategies for that as possible. And destination resorts are one opportunity that other communities have used to create economic development opportunities and new housing. And so we felt that it was appropriate to pursue that. I think the other critical reason we're interested in this proposed eligibility map is that staff frequently gets contacted about the potential for a destination resort. And it creates, without having this eligibility map, which is actually required by statute in order to pursue an application, it creates a lot of extra work for our staff. And so this is a tool that we can use to very easily message to any potential developers or community members, property owners, where in Wasco County the state law would actually allow us to permit a destination resort. I do want to note, for those of you who are attending our meetings for the first time, this map looked a lot different when we talked to the citizens about it during our roadshows in February and also at the CAG meeting in March. And that it's because we included an area in Petersburg and also along Thai Ridge. And we did hear significant feedback from members of those community and property owners who were directly impacted, that they had no wish to ever have this property developed into a destination resort. And the Planning Commission heard that feedback at that time and directed staff to remove those areas from the eligibility map. And so that's why we're left with these two areas. So I already talked about why we're pursuing this update. What I wanted to go over is what the eligibility map means, because I don't think that's necessarily super clear to folks. Some people think it means we're automatically waving a wand and permitting destination resorts to occur in Wasco County, and that's simply not the case. The bar to approve a destination resort it's pretty steep. It requires a significant amount of investment in infrastructure and other kinds of amenities, including building a variety of housing types for visitors. So what this map does is, again, shows where in Wasco County we could permit this, and also, conversely, where we wouldn't permit this, because the majority of calls, quite frankly, really want to see this happen in our forest zones or in our national scenic area. So what this map does is make it really clear where in Wasco County these can actually happen. Also, again, it shows for those eligible properties that they do have the potential for a new use for destination resorts. And so it gives property owners an additional development opportunity. So what it doesn't do is, first and foremost, permit a destination resort. It doesn't waive any of the permitting processes or requirements for destination resorts. And it doesn't eliminate opportunities to modify this map in the future. So really, this is just a starting place for a conversation about destination resorts. The plan is to adopt this as a new environmental protection district, and then to actually write rules for this during our land use and development ordinance update, which will be happening starting next year. So the community has ample time to really think strategically about what kinds of regulations we would want to put on this type of development. I know folks are really concerned, again, about water and fire. So we do have the opportunity above and beyond state rules and regulations to add our own rules and regulations to really restrict development that we think is going to adversely impact any of our resources and, of course, our residents. So just again, eligibility map doesn't equal a permit. It's just an eligibility map, just a tool. If a property owner wants to develop a destination resort, they have to apply for it. And it's at that time during the application process that we would invite partners like our fire, roads, emergency services to comment. It's pretty difficult for them to comment without an actual application to respond to. And while we do have a periodic review assistance team and other stakeholders that are involved in Wasco County 2040 and have been informed, really, it wouldn't be the appropriate time for them to comment on a destination resort because they don't have anything to respond to. So again, eligibility map only doesn't mean we're going to see these spring up overnight. I mentioned the next steps for destination resort really is to work on rules above and beyond what state law requires for these with our Ludo update. And that process is going to be public. It's going to be, we hope, build on the momentum of the last several years with Wasco County 2040. We have a lot of opportunity to sit and talk about what the additional standards and regulations really should be for Wasco County. Finally, there were some additional Goal 5 updates. So we switched from a historical landmarks commission to the planning director for things like demolition or modifications to historical resources. And we made some slight modifications to the aggregate mining language. We also slightly modified the format. So you'll see that moving forward, a slightly modified format. Specifically removed some extra columns, and that was just for ease of reading. We found it to be a little bit cumbersome. So that is all I've got. I'm happy to well, I don't think we're going to take questions. I'll be repeating these presentations on the 15th, and it will then be an opportunity for the planning commissioners to ask questions. But I think now, Chair, if I'm correct, we're going to open it up to public comment. And I've got a list ready to go for you.
Okay, yeah. If you would like to start with that list, that'd be helpful. You can go through and we'll keep everybody to try to keep your comments to three minutes. And this is a time to get read into the record so that it's on and it'll get passed on to everybody that needs to be passed on. And Dr. Kelly, if you want to start calling people out, we'll give
I'm going to give the first 3 names that I have on my list, if they can just be prepared in order to unmute themselves. The first person is Catherine Philbin. The second person is Desi Remington. And the third person is Kyle Popma. Is Catherine Philbin on the call?
I am. Can you hear me? Okay. So actually, I just now tuned in, so I missed a good portion of what you were saying. So I think I'm going to pass this time, and I'll just listen in. And sorry about that. Anyway.
Thank you, Catherine. I will be repeating the staff presentations on the 15th,
Okay.
pretty much right at 3:15, 3:30ish. So, and if in the interim you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, thank you.
So the next person on the list is Desi Remington.
Excuse me, Kelly, could you make sure that the speakers supply their where they're from too?
Yes, of course. Thanks for the reminder. If everybody can just state their name and address for the record, we use that to notify you on any movement forward. So before you speak, name and address for the record. Desi, are you on the call?
Yeah, I am. So Desi Remington, I'm out here in Petersburg, and I wanted to say that we were happy to see the revision to the recreation map for the destination, and that information had been updated on where the agricultural land was. So I just wanted to say that we were happy to see that. So thank you.
Thank you for your feedback, Desi. So the next person on the list is Kyle. Okay, I'm going to give a minute for Kyle. The next person on the list is Mary Bushman. And I believe Mary contacted me before and said she wanted to talk actually on two different proposed revisions. So she may take a little bit longer than 3 minutes. After Mary, we're going to go to Krista Louise.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mary Bushman, and I live at 2280 Dundas Way in Mosier, outside of Mosier. I'm going to give a couple comments both on the Goal 5 revision and the Goal 4 revision. The Goal 5 revision, and I'm sorry I missed all of the road shows, but I do have some concerns, so maybe some of these were talked over during that time. But first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to update all of the planning, the comprehensive plan. I think it's great. I think it's right on. It always is helpful to bring things up to date as the world evolves. My comments about Goal 5 start with the fact that maybe this is something I just don't understand, but Goal 5 is actually natural resources, scenic and historic areas, and open spaces. It isn't just wildlife. So I'm concerned that more of these other resource values were not discussed today. Maybe they were discussed in previous calls, but whether they were or not, I'm just gonna throw a few things out there that I feel are missing. I did review the strike through and the new version of the Goal 5. So what I see is missing in the Goal 5 update are a few things. One is, I think that we should be thinking about where the bulk of development is happening in Wasco County, which is obviously up sort of between the Dells and Hood River. So the resources that are there are still valuable. I realize that the scenic area has some impact on that, but there's still a lot of development happening outside of the scenic area. So I'm concerned about the fact that in the new EPD 8 map, the areas that had previously been protected in the Mosier, Dry Creek, Rowena areas that were in, I can't remember the name of it. There are areas that were identified as needing to just notify people that they were in this area. I'm disappointed that those were removed completely because I think that there is still wildlife there. And even though it didn't restrict the development that you could do, when people go in to build and develop there, they become more aware that these areas still provide wildlife. And I realize that the big game wildlife is about migration, but I will tell you right now, because it's so dry, the elk herds are coming through my property to try to find water. So I know that they're here even though we are outside of the migration corridor. I'm also concerned about wetlands. I have wetlands on my property. I noticed that they're mapped on the National Wetland Inventory. When we developed our property, I did not have any indication from the county that there were wetlands on our property. So I think that the county should do a local wetland inventory to include in the Goal 5 update. So the next few things are, and additionally to the EPD 8 map is largely focused on big game. I think that there are a lot of wildlife that are super important in our area that maybe are not represented by that map. On my property outside, which is outside of the new EPD 8 area, but it was in the old one, we have species of state concern, such as the Lewis's woodpecker and the olive-sided flycatcher, who are here on our property to do nesting, breeding, and so these areas are important for other wildlife values. It isn't just about big game, and I think that that's missing in Wasco County's Goal 5 work. The other thing that about removing this lesser restrictive wildlife area from our area was that it really did help highlight to people who were developing how they could learn about the importance of wildlife there. And I think that the county should take a role in that. I see that in some of the other goals that you're taking a sort of education and communication perspective. And I think that it's important with Goal 5 resources as well. So I think I would ask that you please consider bringing back the voluntary measures area for these wildlife areas, and also really accentuating more of the breadth of the wildlife values that are here. So that's my Goal 5 comments. My Goal 4 forest lands comments are a little bit shorter. But one of the things that I've lived in rural Oregon all my life, not just in Wasco County, but in the Coast Range of Oregon. I know that conifer forestry is super important to our economy. I appreciate that in the Goal 5 language, we also talk about having forest land that is consistent with the management of soil, air, water, fish, and wildlife resources. I'm concerned that the economically efficient forest practices often overarches and overwhelms the other resources that are so important. And case in point, I think that much of the area as you come down off of Mount Hood and go out into the eastern part of Wasco County, when you're in those oak woodland habitats, oak and pine woodlands, oftentimes people are really encouraged to manage those for conifer, and it's really, in many cases, damaging to the habitats to do that. Oak woodlands are really important for wildlife, and even more importantly, they're very fire resilient. And I think it's very important that the county recognize that these oak habitats have a whole lot to add to the story of how people live in these areas. Oaks are really going to be important as we go through climate change. Oaks are much more tolerant of drought and are much better at surviving a wildfire. As we've seen actually here in Mosier, a lot of the forests were damaged, but I think that they're going to be, the oak forests are going to come back. Oak currently isn't a high value commodity, but I have been in touch with industries that are looking at oak products such as wine barrels, whiskey barrels, furniture, flooring, and biochar. So it has value, and we need to start making sure that that is reflected in our goal language. There's even a company in Portland whose primary sales is whiskey barrels that are made from Oregon white oak. And she's really a hot dog. She wants to buy up all the oak she can. So it does have it is a commodity, which sort of, you know, it's important for habitat, but I want people to realize it's important for a lot of other things as well.
Mary, that was 6 minutes.
Okay. So that's it. I'm going to also provide some written comments with a little bit more detail. So I appreciate the time, and thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Angie and Chris, for hosting us.
Okay, the next person signed up to comment is Krista Louise. After that, I have no first name, last name Slevin, J.K. Slevin.
Yes, that would be me, John Slavin.
Okay, so it sounds like Krista is not here. So we'll come back to Krista if you're ready, Mr. Slavin. Slavin, correct.
Thank you. 1932 Further Valley Road off Osborne Cutoff, where a lot of the firefighters were parked in our front yard here just recently. I'd like to really just echo a lot of the previous speakers. First of all, thank you for all the work. I know what it takes from the planning departments and everyone else, and it's not an easy job. It's fairly thankless, so I will give you a thanks for doing this. But some of my concerns is going on the websites, looking at the maps, you couldn't really dig into them and look at them. As soon as you tried to blow them up, they just became blurry. The definition was poor. They seemed more like they were PDFs. So it was very hard to navigate and understand what exactly was going on, what had changed, where the boundaries were. So I think better information that's available so people can even understand what it is, because change is very concerning. Even if it winds up being change in your favor, change is tough on people. Secondly, though, I'd really like to emphasize given all the fires, a lot of the people pushing into these forest lands, non-compliant structures, that caused a lot of problems. And I just want to make sure that we're preserving a lot of this land for both the wildlife, the oak forest was talked about, not just, logging. I'm primarily talking about the forestry aspects. And that we're looking at many of the other species that are in there, the cougar, the bobcats, the deer, the owls, the bats that control the insects that need old oak trees to hide out in during the daytime in the hollow core. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be preserved, and I'm afraid we're just looking at a few elements and not the bigger picture. And then overall, I couldn't understand if they're proposing more development, less development, more restrictions, less. It was very confusing. But I am concerned about many of those areas that have just gotten burnt and things that are similar, pushing more homes into those. You either need to denude the habitat to make the houses safe and clear everything out around them, which takes out the wildlife, or you have all these structures that are going to burn in the next wildfire. So it wasn't clear to me how this was all impacting that, and whether you're looking at a full species or just the large marker terries. And with that, I will conclude my comments.
Thank you. So the next person we have signed up to talk is Shelley Filgo. And then after that will be Josh Ellison. Is Shelley Filgo on the call? Okay, we'll come back to Shelley. Josh,
just a reminder for people on the phone that maybe forgot how to unmute themselves. You have to dial *6 to unmute yourself. Sorry about that, Kelly.
No, thank you. So we're going to skip Shelley and Josh Allison. Are you on the phone, Josh? Okay, we'll come back to Josh and Shelley. Sheila Dooley.
I'm not, oh, here I am. Second. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. I support the recommendation made by the Citizens Advisory Group at its August 4th meeting. I can mention Sheila Dooley, 3300 Venzel Road, Mosier. For Goal 4 forest land, the updated language is consistent with current practice, and the added wildfire recommendations are consistent with CPAW, the Community Planning Assistance for Wildfire, and the CWPP Community Wildfire Protection Plan. As proposed, Goal 4 updates reflect updates also made in Goal 7, natural hazards, in regard to wildfire mitigation. People I know in the forest land support restrictions due to the increased risk of fire. The gorge has high winds and steep terrain. Adding more residences not only increases the fire risk, but results in firefighters diverting their time and resources to fight structure fires rather than stopping a fire spread. Today, in the Mosier Valley newsletter, there was the following statement. One homeowner told me as I stared at the burned out slope behind her house, ending a couple of feet from her back door, that firefighters sat on the ground with their backs to her house, tools in hand, all night watching for flare-ups and keeping the fire at bay. And this is an example of protecting one house versus stopping the fire spread. And then they also talked about how the fire was driven, the Mosier Creek fire was driven by 3 factors: fuel, weather, and topography. Mosier hadn't had any rain for more than 2 months. Almost all the fuel was completely dry. Winds were driving the fire up drainages very fast. The topography included steep slopes, houses tucked into forested landscapes, and steep drainages that allowed the fire to leap up and over hills. This is a very challenging fire. Okay, 90% of Oregon wildfires are human caused. The percentage of human caused fires has increased 10% this year, according to the state official. With climate change, we expect this to continue to increase. Wildfires, lack of water, and roads are all concerns. Inadequate infrastructure, such as roadways, make it difficult to get fire suppression equipment in and out during an emergency, which relates to Goal 7 natural hazards. Much of forest land is not in a fire district, it's on steep terrain. There is no fire truck access on some private roads leading to development. Our steep narrow road Vinsel is impassable at times during winter and only room for one vehicle at some times. During the Mosier Creek fire evacuation, we encountered an oversized truck and 2 trucks pulling cattle trailers on Upper Chenoweth Road, which is a steep, narrow, winding road. I had to back up on the hill 3 times, which slowed things down. With more development, it'd be a real mess during an emergency. As I mentioned, the fire came within 3/4 of our house. It takes 60 to 80 years to grow marketable timber. If growing trees are in it for the long haul, if destroyed by a fire, it would take generations to replace old trees. In the 50s, there were 7 to 8 sawmills operating in the Mosier Valley, and much of it was clear cut. We're now beginning to see big trees again. With selective logging, you can continue to make a profit over time and also have some habitat. Due to the wildfire risks involved, combined with the lack of road capacity, fire protection, and water, I urge you to adopt Goal 4 as recommended and not adopt new provisions such as the template test that have not worked out in other areas of the state and that arbitrarily increase fire risk in a forest zone. Okay, thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Sheila. I saw Josh Ellison pop back in. Josh?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to yield most of my time back to you and defer it to the 15th as I do some more study. At the present time, I think my biggest comment, and I'm echoing several, is trying to understand in layman's terms what the real impacts would be. And I'd recommend that in the 15th meeting that perhaps the committee can put together something that's a little more in layman's terms that will help us understand the impact side of this. That's my comments for today, and I'll yield the rest of my time for somebody else.
Thank you. So the next person is John Pearson. Mr. John Pearson, are you on the phone?
*6 to unmute.
Okay, we can come back to Mr. Pearson. The last person I have that's registered to comment is Kim Mead. Kim Mead. And just a reminder to state your name and address for the record.
This is Kim Mead on Victor Road on Juniper Flat, and we would like to pass at this time.
Thank you. So I'm just going to go back through my list really quickly and make sure everybody who registered to comment.
Kelly?
Yes.
I think Joseph Pearson would probably like to make a comment too also.
Okay, yeah, we'll go back to everybody who's not registered.
Okay.
I just want to go through the list one more time and offer people who were signed up to comment. So Krista Louise. Last call for Krista. Okay, Shelley Filgo. Okay, I'm not hearing anything from Shelley Filgo. And last call for John Pearson. Okay, at this time, we're going to open up commenting to anybody who hasn't registered to comment. The
Kelly?
preference- Yes.
I would like to comment as an individual. This is Vicki Ashley, Bakeoven Road.
Okay, so what I was going to, so sorry, Vicki, what I was going to recommend is that we start with everybody who's video chatting and then move to folks on the phone.
I cannot do both. I have to video with one and phone with the voice.
Right, so we're going to call for folks on the video first, and then we'll go to folks on the phone.
Okay.
So is there anybody who's on video who would like to give comment at this time? You can wave at us or put your name into the chat function. Okay, I'm seeing Mr. Joseph Pearson. We'll go to him next. For any of you who are on the video call who would like to comment, please go ahead and enter your name into the chat function.
I have a very quick question, and that's all. I wanted to find out if the PowerPoint presentation that you gave, is that something that I can get on your website?
Yes, it's part of the packet that's available on the Wasco County website under upcoming agendas and meetings.
Very good. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
I'm also happy for anybody who would like, because I did make some last minute changes, anybody who would like a copy, I'm happy to email it to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
It was a good presentation.
Thank you so much. Anybody else who's on the video chat who would like to give comment? You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
This is John Pearson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Pearson.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I never, I don't know what happened to that mute, but it, okay. So I live at 1000 Wilson Road in Mosier, and it's a historic cattle ranch from the 1800s, belonged to Judge Wilson. And we have, our family has quite a bit of land up here in different parcels. Probably, well, there's probably 15, 20 parcels up here. Historic parcels that were divided in way back in the early 70s. And we have some parcels that we are wanting to build. Our older brother who lives here, he's 89. We want to build him a home on there. And so we're probably going to, I guess, have to go through the exception, even though some of this property never was really forest land. Some of it is, some of it isn't. It's kind of a mixed use. Some of it's unsuitable for anything. And it's what I call marginal lands. And we have miles of roads on the property. And I guess I need to know how to get going through a process to try to get our older brother, his smaller home. He wants to downsize. And so I'm concerned that, people have a lot to say about leaving everyone else's property vacant, but maybe they don't own land and have to take care of it and have to spend thousands every year for fire prevention. And so I would hope that people that are wanting you to preserve everybody else's land for the benefit of others, I hope they have some land in the game, some skin in the game too, that they own land that's going to be impacted by this. So I just need to find out what the process is. With you being closed, I haven't been able to come over and talk to anybody about these issues. And so what's the procedure now with the COVID thing as far as exploring using a couple of our parcels for family members that are retiring?
I'm going to unmute myself. Angie, are you going to address that?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to let you know, Mr. Pearson, that our planning staff is working full-time but remotely. So if you reach out to any one of us through this call or to me directly, I can have a planner follow up with you and help you navigate the rules that are currently in effect for what you're looking to do.
Okay, that would be great.
And I may actually have your email address from previous conversations. If you think that's true, I can send you a contact info right now.
Yes, that is. I'm sure I've been to a lot of your meetings over the years, and I really appreciate all the work you guys are putting into cleaning up old business. And I'm just apprehensive. I hope we have some property rights done left when it's done.
Thank you. We appreciate your participation throughout this whole process. It's been a couple of years.
Is there anybody
Yeah,
else?
so
Anybody else who would like to comment? Vicki, do you want to go ahead while we wait for anybody else?
I'm trying to unmute.
Okay, got it. As a private individual, I'd like to express concern about the recreation overlay. This goes to the east side of the Deschutes River. I'm a member of the fire protection district within the area. It's very steep ground, inaccessible. The only way you'll fight a fire is with air. With limited water, there would be very little sewage. Everything runs through the river. So I'd like to say that we're opposed to it on our side of the river.
Thank you, Vicki. Anybody else who's on the call that would like to give comment? Make sure you state your name and address for the record.
Dr. Kelly?
Is someone trying to speak?
You're
Yes,
muted,
I'm
Kelly.
ready. Oh, am I muted?
Kelly is muted.
No, we can hear you. Go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, that were made about this process, is there a way to condense those into a form that we can easily look at? I think somebody mentioned earlier to put things in layman's terms. And so if we could see maybe on one page, the changes listed. And I know that you had part of your presentation showed pictures of certain parts of the update, but some of those pictures were pretty small. So could you create something that we could read in a one-page form?
So just to address that comment, we do have an extensive FAQ, so frequently asked questions, available on the project website that walks you through all of these changes. It's about one page of material with some links to go elsewhere. As you can imagine, some of what we're dealing with is pretty technical, so we don't want to oversimplify it and then create any additional confusion. But we did break up all of the revisions into individual posts on the project website and tried to message it in multiple ways possible. So if you have gone to the FAQs and you're still having some difficulty, I can see if I can maybe strategically think about another type of way to message it. But again, it's difficult because it's complicated and it's a lot of material. It's hundreds of pages of material. So I would advise everybody to spend some time on the project website, and that hopefully will answer the questions. One other thing I wanted to address, there's been some frustration with the maps. I want to make it clear that the maps, as they're presented on the project website, you should be able to open them up as PDFs and see a much higher resolution. And then for EPD 8, you can look at the current EPD on our interactive web map, and you can look at the proposed on ODF and W's Compass websites. So there are a couple different options for actually seeing what the proposed maps look like. Are there anybody else on the call who would like to provide comment? Okay, Ms. Meeker.
Can I interrupt for a second, Kelly? Could the last speaker say their name and address again? I did not hear it. It was just echoing. I did not hear the beginning of their comment.
That was for the last speaker, 541-390-3284.
No.
Okay, looks like the numbers jumped around. The last lady who asked for a handout. Jency, we may have to come back to that. If the
Kathy Cantrell.
Sorry, I heard a name, Kathy.
Yes, I believe it was Kathy Cantrell. I don't know if she's not able to unmute.
Okay.
Her address is 81692 Dufur Valley Road.
Okay, thank you. Great. And then I think Ms. Cantrell, I've got her login information, Jency, so we should have it for the record. Ms. Meeker has identified that she would like to speak.
Yeah, thanks. I just had a quick question. I just have this one sheet of paper that I got in the mail. And so I wondered, could you give the web address to where that FAQ was you were referencing?
Absolutely. It is on the notification list, but it's wasco2040.com. And you'll see on the sidebar, so on the right-hand side, it'll say, hey, did you get a postcard? Did you get a letter? Click here to find out more information. And that's going to take you to the FAQ.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. I see Jamie Hunt has a hand raised. Jamie Hunt.
Yes, hi. Jamie Hunt. I'm actually out in Boyd. So 66370 Boyd Loop Road. I'm looking at maps and seeing that it looks like you've taken some of the riparian areas off the map that are located in this area. And we really want to make sure that those little critters that live there are protected from what is admittedly a pretty fast development thing going on out here. But those little critters need some help.
So we have, I think there was also a comment on earlier in the call asking about, I think Ms. Buckman was interested about other Goal 5 changes that we've made. We did the bulk of Goal 5 changes last year. The only thing we did with riparian areas and wetlands was to do what the state required us, which was to switch from the national wetland inventory to the state wetland inventory. We're actually the first county to adopt that, so that's a feather in our cap. But really what the state wetland inventory is it's an aggregate of data. So it's the national wetland inventory, which we were using previously, as well as any specific information for the county, some soil and water information. So we aren't proposing to remove any riparian areas or impact the wetlands. Really, it's just a modification. So I'm not really sure which map you were looking at that showed that, Ms. Hunt, but I'm happy to talk with you about that offline. If you want to email me, we can have a discussion about that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Any other folks who are on the call or on the video who would like to leave a comment? And just to stress again, the Planning Commission did extend the hearing until September 15th. So we're going to leave the record open. That means you're welcome to submit written comment. We have a few ways to do that. You can send us a letter in the mail. We don't get those often, but we love to get them. You can email me directly, and my information, I sent most of you who registered an email ahead of time, so you can just reply to that. We also have a submit a comment function on the Wasco 2040 project website. It's under participate. And that's also a really easy way to submit comments, whatever you've got on your mind, and that will make it into the record. And you will have seen some folks have already utilized that, and those comments become part of the packet that's presented. So the run of the hearing on the 15th will be, again, we'll have the business as we did tonight, and then I'll be giving those presentations again, and then we're going to open it up for comment again, and then at that point in time, the Planning Commission will deliberate based on feedback and make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners does have 2 public hearings before they make a recommendation of adoption or denial. So there are still 3 opportunities for you to submit public feedback. And we so appreciate you all attending tonight, listening to our spiel, hopefully getting some good information, and of course, giving us your feedback. That's been really, really critical over the last several years of this process. And we truly appreciate you taking some time out to share your feedback with us. It's the cornerstone of what we do. Anybody else who would like to give comments? Okay, Director, Chair, I'm not seeing anybody else.
I do see that Commissioner Willis has her hand raised and has for a while. I just want to check to make sure that wasn't intentional and she has something to share.
It was
Kate, I'm really sorry. I don't think you're coming through very clearly. Do you have the ability to call in?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
It was unintentional. Please disregard.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything to add, Chair. I just want to thank Kelly for the great presentation and the work that went into that, and thank the public for their excellent turnout. I see 35 participants on the line. That's wonderful. Like Kelly said, public participation really truly is the cornerstone of what we do. It's why we're doing this work at all, is to make sure that our plans work for the residents and that our vision documents align with the goals and visions of our community. So thank you very much for your continued support and participation in this project, and in sort of repeating from other recent meetings with our planning commissioners. Thank you for your dedication over the last several years and seeing this effort through. It's been quite a journey. So to be on the final work task and on the final couple of hearings is a very big deal for us as staff, but also for you as planning commissioners and for the county as a whole. So thank you very much. And Chair, I can share a few other things if you'd like a director's report, but I would defer to you in the agenda what you'd like next.
Okay, so we'll, thanks, Kelly. That was fantastic. It's good. That's hard work, and it's hard to get it to from your level to our level, so we appreciate it. We'll consider the hearing continued until September 15th. The record will remain open and comments in writing can be submitted up until the hearing via mail or email. There will also be an opportunity for public comment at September 15th. Thanks for your attendance and participation this evening. So let's, one thing before you take over, Director Brewer, I forgot to do the approval of the past minutes from the May 5th, 2020 meeting. If Commissioner McIntyre wants to take over, she can.
Oh, I would like to move approval of the minutes of May 5th, 2020.
I second. This is Commissioner Willis.
Okay, it's been moved to approve by Commissioner McIntyre and seconded by Commissioner Willis. Is there any discussion on it? Okay, hearing none, let's have a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, we'll consider them approved. And now let's go to Director Brewer for, we can find out what's happening.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep it concise so we can end on time. Obviously, we'll be seeing you all again on the 15th, but in between now and then, there is a hearing hosted by the Columbia River Gorge Commission for their comprehensive plan update process. Their final hearing is next Tuesday, September 8th. And I'll be attending that and likely making comments, final comments on behalf of our department, and likely to be joined by Chair Hagee of the Wasco County Board of County Commissioners, who will probably share comments on behalf of the county. We're still coordinating on that messaging, but if you're interested in seeing any of the documents that we've put on the record for their process, because their comprehensive plan update process will directly affect the lands in Wasco County that are in the National Scenic Area, and we will ultimately be required to implement those rules once they're completed. If you're interested in seeing anything we've put on the record, we have created a dedicated web page, a landing page, where all of those documents have been uploaded and shared. And as you'll recall, we did send out a postcard to our affected residents in June, I believe, to make sure our residents were aware. They've had a similar timeline for their project as our 2040 project. It's been interesting to sort of compare and contrast our methodologies along the way. We've been fairly critical and concerned about their lack of local involvement over the course of their project, but we certainly put things on the record, and they're certainly considering it, and we're hopeful that they'll hear those concerns before they finalize their decision next week. So stay tuned. I'll be back with more about that. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a shout directly. I can also let you know that we will be having a Planning Commission hearing in October. We have an appeal of a local land use decision that also happens to be in the scenic area, but it is an appeal of one of our local land use decisions. So please keep that date on your calendars for the regular meeting time in October. And we're also likely to convene you in November. So if you could hold those two regular dates, that'd be fantastic. I'm trying to think if there's anything also to be aware of. Our senior planner, Will Smith, kicked off the initial meetings for our community wildfire prevention planning efforts last week. That is likely, you're likely to hear more about that in the very near future, and it's timely to have the conversations. Wildfire season was a little bit late, but my goodness, it came back out and got us for sure. And as Kelly mentioned earlier, our CPAW work from about a year and a half ago now will be very useful in informing those strategies in the community conversations moving forward. If you'll recall, a few years ago, there was a conversation about updates to our flood hazard maps, our floodplain maps. That conversation has finally circled back from FEMA and the state of Oregon, and I'll be getting an update this Thursday. So by the time we see you again, I may be able to share more information on that. And we have a few other irons in the fire for updating some hazard maps. As you'll recall, we did receive some funds to update our geologic hazard inventory from Dagami, and we're pursuing a new request with the Department of Defense to update some notification requirements that recent legislation requires us to do for most specifically wind farm proposals that are in flight paths for military aircraft. So just heads up on those things. Other than that, the team is humming along. We're doing most of our work remotely. Site visits are still occurring where we can ensure the safety of our staff and our customers. We are still working regular hours and still available for anyone pursuing permits or other needs that are met by our office, including code compliance and hazardous waste and recycling. Do any of you have any questions for anything we're working on or would like an update on something specific? Okay, I appreciate your time this evening. Always available for you guys, and look forward to meeting with you in a couple weeks.
All right, thanks, Director Brewer. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Hargraves moves to adjourn. Commissioner McIntyre seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Let me try opposed again. All opposed? All right, let's adjourn. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Kylie.
And thank you, public.
And thank you, public. Yes, definitely.